One thing I said that I would never do. All up from you when I would fall from grace, and I would wipe the smile right from my face. Do you remember when we used to dance? An incident arose from circumstance. One thing led to another, we were young, and we would scream together, son, son, son. It was the heat of the moment, telling me what my heart meant. The heat of the moment, showed in your eyes. And now you find yourself in 82. Don't be caught for cold, not jump for you. You can transfer yourself with me to see. You can support to ride the dragon's wing. Oh, 'cause it's the heat of the moment. The heat of the moment. The heat of the moment. Showed in your
Asia's history belongs really to the prog-rock movement in Britain in the 70s, or the great classic rock movement in Britain in the 70s. The four gentlemen involved were all people of great pedigrees.
I remember buying the album, and it was emblazoned with a sticker featuring ex-members of Yes, King Crimson, Uriah Heep, Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Carl Palmer, the drummer, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Atomic Rooster before that.
Steve Howe, guitar player from Yes.
John Wetton on bass and vocals, had a history taking in Roxy Music, King Crimson, Uriah Heep.
And Jeff Downs, who'd been in Buggles.
Geffen Records had just started at the time, and a guy called John Kolodner, who was the A&R man, had worked in the past with all four of those guys, and he had the idea of putting together this supergroup, for want of a better description.
Asia was the last in a trail of supergroups. I don't know, in a way, when we came out in America in 1982, they kind of treated us like the first of the supergroups of the 80s, you know. Those sort of things, you know, aren't the sort of things I dream up. You know, I dream up guitar riffs and things like that.
London is a very small place, really, as far as musicians are concerned. Everything is quite close-knit and everybody knows each other. And because of what had happened in the previous 12 to 18 months, that is, the contact that had been made between Carl and myself, and having met with Jeff, it was really not down to choosing off a shortlist. There were very few people that one wanted to work with at that time. And if it coincided, which it did, that those people were available and wanted to do it. It wasn't like recruitment. It was coming together, each one for the common cause of being in a group that everybody wanted to be in. Brian Lane, her manager at the time, had made a few suggestions which hadn't worked, and people came through the rehearsal room door and tried out when the four of us were actually there as a nucleus. And when they left, we just felt that they were invading something that was already actually a group.
If you're a rock fan, I mean, it was jaw hit the floor. To the music media of the time, it was a bunch of dinosaurs. They were slagged off before they'd even made a note of music. The press hammered them because they were a supergroup. You know, and they don't like that sort of thing. Johnny Rotten didn't bare his soul so you bunch of old farts could get together and make a noise. That sort of thing.
I think the concept just bored people, you know. They thought it was going to be another art rock band, and it wasn't.
We had a lot of blind faith type analogies bantered around before the album actually came out. But it was almost, because it moved so fast in America, the British and European press were virtually obliged to follow it and report it of what was happening in America at the time. But because we were against that fashionable grain, we got quite a lot of flack. But I mean, it didn't really didn't really matter that much because by that time we were moving so fast in America.
I think most of the reviews at the time, if I remember rightly, spent about, if you read them, 3/4 of the review was saying why it shouldn't work and what a dreadful concept it was. And then the last quarter or 1/3 or the last line of each review said, oh, by the way, it's a good record, you know.
You've got to realise that that means nothing in England. Music is disposed of very quickly in England. I mean, I don't think any of us have ever had any really good reports or write-ups in any papers. I mean, I've been told that I'm a waste of electricity.
And he plays an acoustic instrument.
Well, we do have to put microphones over drums, gentlemen, for those of us who have not been to many concerts. No, but I mean, the English press, they're just... it's just the environment musically in general in England is just so fast. It's like the fast food in this country. I mean, one year you've got Boy George, the next minute you've got Bros, and the following year you've not heard of either of them.
The whole music industry had set itself up for something, another great British invasion of punk rock, which never happened. That was about 76, 77, and the aftermath of that was that record companies were still running around signing punk bands, and it just wasn't getting on the radio. Nobody was going to see the concerts, and we fell into a musical climate that everybody thought was outdated at the time, I think, which is why the press, who was so pro this new wave, were against us right from the beginning. We got some very bad reviews before we'd even put the record out, and I just think it was what people wanted at that time. We managed to fall into that category. We created our own category, in fact.
Well, when your looks are gone and you're alone, how many nights you sit beside the phone? What were the things you wanted for yourself? Teenage ambitions you'll remember well. 'Cause it's the heat of the moment, telling you what to hold, man. The heat of the moment, showing you right. Heat of the moment, heat of the moment, the heat of the moment, showing you right.
This all depends on your approach to music. You know, I love prog rock. I love all the album sleeves. I love the kind of the imagery and artwork that goes hand in hand with it. It's just it appeals to me. So a Roger Dean album sleeve, I'm going to look at it and go, I like it. You know, I'm sure there are other people that take one look and want to throw up. That's it. I mean, and that's no criticism of the quality of Roger's artwork. It's just how they are. I mean, I love it. Roger Dean has created some of the greatest album covers of all time.
The key for me was Steve, because Steve was one of the members of the band, and when he left Yes and joined Asia, I sort of went with them, but they were anxious not to look like Yes, and they tried lots of logos and lots of covers, and I just said to Steve one day, because I could see they were still struggling with it, I said, you know, you could go with an Asian dragon. I mean, that's nothing like Yes, and I could paint you one. And I could do you a logo that's nothing like Yes, because everyone associated the curvy lines with Yes. So I did them the pyramid and the dragon.
And it wasn't too steeped in what he'd done before. It did kind of make a bit of a splash, that sort of serpent and the orb, and a lovely logo, brilliant Asia logo I think he created.
I wanted to do a Chinese dragon that was credible as a living creature to us, and that took it away from Yes. It's also a very passive design, although it's an incredibly dynamic beast sort of swirling in the water. It's very passive. It's that pyramid form sitting on the broad base. That's the design of the painting.
The album sleeve, it's got like 1 foot in the past of like, this is what these guys did, but also going off in a new direction. And the music that they made was sort of, well, it was sort of commercial heavy rock with progressive flourishes, but it wasn't prog rock. So, I mean, that was interesting in itself.
The whole thing, the design and everything, just lend itself to the fact that it was put together. But by being put together, it's not false. It still has a real sense of spontaneity.
'Cause it's the heat of the moment, telling me what I want, man. The heat of the
Strangely enough, with those four people, virtuosos, each one in their own right, you'd have expected a real progressive rock type of band. But what they came out with as Asia was a very modern pop rock record, albeit with a much higher level of musicianship than one perhaps may have expected. Hit singles, which is crazy. I wonder whether part of it was because Jeff Downes had a hit single background through Buggles, and part of it may well have been boredom by the other guys that they'd done all the progressive stuff and wanted to do something perhaps that made more of an immediate impact.
The frame of mind that I was in, I was hoping that I would enter into a situation which was a song-orientated band rather than any long conceptual pieces, because I'd been playing that for a 9-year period. So when we started to play, the material obviously was perfect for me, for my way of thinking at the time. So the impression was it could have been very good or it could have been very bad. It turned out to be very good. And you know what it's like, you can have great musicians all together, but if they don't play good material, then it's really not going to be interesting. If you have great musicians and great material, you do have something special.
There is something of the nature of the master musicians throughout the record. You know you're listening to master musicians, but you're also listening to master musicians working within a song structure. So it's not a progressive album, not in the case of a prog rock record, but there's a certain sense of progressive musicians are involved here, and their talent is still very much to the fore.
I was always a big admirer and a big fan of what were sort of loosely termed the British art rock bands. But I think as music developed through the 70s, the emphasis on song was almost became less and less, and I think that's one of the reasons why quite a lot of them actually, the popularity of them waned towards the end of the 70s, because there wasn't that emphasis on the vocals. I mean, they were also competing with a lot of the jazz rock stuff that was coming out of America in the mid-70s, the sort of Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea thing, which was very sort of musician-based movement. And for me, the excitement was to get, great playing and that sort of innovative playing in much more of a tight framework. And I think that's what we all felt with Asia, and I think that's what we achieved to an extent.
For me, there are three key tracks on the album: Only Time Will Tell, Heat of the Moment, and Soul Survivor.
Heat of the Moment, Only Time Will Tell, and Soul Survivor were the three big singles.
The reason being, each is different to the others, but each has the same bottom line: is combination of great music, great musicianship, but catchy chorus.
Very radio friendly, very commercial, brilliant hooks.
You immediately got hooked the first time you heard it. Oh, this is rather good. What is this? And then you got actually locked into the fact that it was a song with a chorus, a song with great musicianship. So it's a rock song, but it had a pop sensibility.
What we're talking about is we're taking a musical approach from the classic progressive rock bands and aligning it with a writing approach very much from the sort of the FM friendly American rock bands like Journey and REO Speedwagon and Styx and Toto. Right? It hit those two subgenres of rock colliding, and out of that comes Asia and what they did.
It is much more difficult to condense 15 minutes into 4 and have the same impact, and yet still have a certain amount of commerciality and identity. And that's really crafting music to the highest degree, as far as I'm concerned. To have a 15-minute piece of music and sort of long, drawn-out musical passages, it's all very well and it's very nice, but I think all things must develop, and that idea in itself lasted for 10 years, the conceptual piece, the 15-minute piece of music. I think entering into the 80s, musicians had to redesign, rethink, restructure their ideas in such a way where 4 or 5 minutes they could say what they did before in 20. And for me, that was a great attraction. So that's what I was looking for. And the 80s were crying out for that. But you had to have a certain amount of expertise, writing ability, playing ability, to be able to do that.
When they turned their hands to doing something slightly more melodic than perhaps their reputations would suggest, they could do it because to them it was second nature to make anything they worked on happen. And they did make it work and happen. And those 3 songs are strong because the intros lock you in, and the rest of the song keeps you there, and they never get boring. They don't overplay, and that's the other crucial thing. At no point on those 3 songs do the band overplay, which must have been so tempting for people of that ability.
Find that you planned it all along. I've seen it now, become so clear. Your insincerity, me your starry-eyed. You think that I would have known by now. Now, sure as the sun will cross the sky, this lie is over. Lost like the tears that used to tide me over. One thing is sure, the time will tell.
There's no question that the 3 big songs on the first Asia album, Only Time Will Tell, Heat of the Moment, Soul Survivor, were written with the whole idea of airplay. We want to get it on radio, we want to get it onto what was to be MTV, we want mass exposure, and if we're going to get mass exposure, we can't make it a 10-minute track with great long solos and there's a song around it somewhere, wrapped in there. You have to make it short and sharp and to the point.
Very radio friendly, but very musical as well. I mean, you listen, if you listen beyond the hook lines, I mean, there's a hell of a lot going on all of those records. They all wrote, but the big writing partnership was Jeff Downes and John Wetton. And they remain to this day a brilliant writing partnership when they work together.
My feeling is John Wetton was probably more involved than most in the songs, being the lyricist anyway, or certainly being the singer. Jeff Downes always had a great sense of melody. I don't believe for a moment that Carl Palmer would have been massively involved in the songwriting, and I think Steve Howe would have contributed, but more on guitar parts. My guess is John Wetton and Jeff Downes had more to do with it than anyone else.
Yeah, Here Comes the Feeling was written the year before Asia started. That was in 1980. The chorus of Heat of the Moment was written, but I didn't have any verse for it. It was originally written in 6/8 as a sort of country and western song. And there were lots of bits and pieces. The chorus of Soul Survivor, which had no verse at the time. I was armed with these sort of pieces of music that really needed finishing off, and that they needed other sections to go with them, and that's where Jeff came in, and we hit it off immediately.
Because Jeff had been in Buggles, he came from a pop background, and John Wetton has a finely tuned ear for a catchy song. So you look at that, and they're the main writing core of Asia, then it's going to sound catchy. And at that time, catchy meant commercial as well. But they, like I said, I mean, those songs aren't fluff, right? You listen beyond the hook line, and there's a lot going on because of the quality of the playing that the players brought to the table.
The musicianship was at such a high level that they could carry all of this off without actually seeming to compromise their own credibility. And that's another amazing thing. They never compromised their credibility. I remember talking to Steve Howe about this once, and Steve Howe basically said, we didn't compromise our credibility because we were that good. And you know what? That's the answer. They were that good. Time Again is one of those songs that I would regard as underrated on the album. You hear the chorus in your head, as soon as you actually hear the song title. It's not a ballad, but it's mid-paced. To me, it's up there with Soul Survivor, for instance.
Time Again or Soul Survivor, I would say, are the two tracks I personally like the most.
Why?
Bit of balls to them.
For what I give you, I get nothing in return. I can't forgive you watching all your bridges burn. All day long I said what you're doing wrong. I had to say that's how you did it all along. Time and time again. Time and time again.
Time Again actually has the feel it could have been a major hit. And if you take Soul Survivor, Only Time Will Tell and Heat of the Moment off the record, had they not existed, this could have been the standout track, this could have been the lead single. And I think that could have made things happen for them almost as easily as the other three.
They decorated all the generals who fought the war behind the lines. times. Insanity has found its way to TV screens. Vision seems impossible to me. Yeah. They fight for king and country. This never would have happened in my wildest dreams. Wildest dreams. Wildest dreams. Wildest dreams. When evening comes, we sit and watch the VJs.
Wildest Dreams is the song that comes closest to being overplayed in terms of the band actually being given a little bit more of a free rein to do things. And I think that's why a lot of people like Wildest Dreams, because it's the moment when some of the band get the opportunity to be a little bit more virtuoso than had been the case on the big hit singles. And to fans of what these four had done in the past, that's what they wanted to hear. They wanted to hear something which allowed the musicians to stretch out. It's all comparative because they don't really go for it, but I think that's part of the reason why Wildest Dreams stands out for people. The other reason is it wasn't overplayed on air. The whole overplaying thing comes in a little bit here. You hear Heat of the Moment, Only Time Will Tell, Soul Survivor again and again and again, and eventually you get fed up with it and think, oh, not again, I want to hear something else on the album. And people turn to Wildest Dreams because it's a very good song, but it didn't get overplayed.
It utilises the musicianship more. It's more of an album track, even though it's very catchy enough to possibly have worked as a single. You know, in context, it's an album track. It's meatier because it doesn't. It's the way the song is constructed. It doesn't rely on the hook line as much.
They recommended euthanasia for non-conformers anywhere. Some men dreams, for others turn to nightmares. This never would have happened in their wildest dreams. Wildest dreams. Wildest dreams. Wildest dreams. Fly away.
The whole concept of Asia, I feel, was always seen as a very high level, a very high commercial level. Money was no object. Geffen Records had started on the back of David Geffen with a vast history in the music business, wanting his own label. They were young, they were vibrant, they were an exciting label, they were hip, they were happening, and they wanted actually to break the bands, so they gave them carte blanche. Money was no object. We know we're going to get our money back in terms of sales, so just go for it, whatever you want, as long as it makes sense, and we know it's going to make sense because you know what you're doing, you've got our backing. Be it financial, be it marketing, whatever it is, we'll give you the backing. So they were lucky in that respect. It wasn't just a case of four musicians getting together and, oh, well, just go off and do something. They were guided as well by John Kolodner, the A&R guy, who I think really saw this as an opportunity to do something that hadn't been done before. Supergroups have been going on for years, mostly failing, but even supergroups that had succeeded within their own niche. I think Kolodner saw this great challenge of breaking it out of the niche and making it a big, big, appealing band. Whatever, it was a very British band that conquered America very quickly.
The success of the record and the American record buying public, that overwhelmed us, that knocked us back. That was something which we didn't understand. I mean, I'd never had that success in my life before, nor had anyone else. So that was a very warm feeling because we didn't get that at home.
It came in on Billboard at 28 in the first week of release, which was incredibly high. So the following week it moved up to 10. So in 2 weeks of its release, it was inside the top 10 on Billboard, which was virtually unheard of. That was the album, yeah.
The single had started going in the tip sheets before then, and then we saw that all four of the main sort of viable songs on the album were being played. That was Heat of the Moment, Only Time Will Tell, Soul Survivor and Wildest Dreams, if I remember rightly. So those were all well away before the album came out. And there was just a great feeling. I mean, the write-ups from the stations around the country were saying, great, fresh sound for the 80s, wonderful. Phones are exploding.
We knew something was happening because Reagan was at the airport to meet us at the time.
There was a lot of push that we got, which helped us to launch Asia. I think the danger was that we were so new together that we were also fragmented by this success. We all felt sort of different about it.
The various reasons why they made such an impact in America are difficult to actually analyse and isolate, but I think one of them was MTV.
Who ironically first aired with the Buggles song, Video Killed the Radio Star.
MTV was coming, and Geffen Records, as a young new label, saw it coming, saw what it would mean, and got Asia to do a lot of promo clips for what were to be singles. And they got a lot of early airplay in MTV because not many bands had promo clips. So that got them attention with a young audience who were getting into this new exciting form of being presented music.
A look from you and I would fall from grace, and that would wipe the smile right from my face. Do you remember when we used to dance, and incidents arose from circumstance? One thing led to another, we were young, and we would scream together songs unsung. It was the heat of the moment, telling me what my heart meant. The heat of the moment showed in your eyes.
At that time, the British music industry was becoming very, very fashion orientated. I suppose with the development of video, they were much more concerned, I think, with the visual image of a band rather than the musical identity of it. In that respect, I think we were against the grain. You know, certainly where we were. I mean, we were rehearsing in London, but it didn't really matter to us. You know, we felt we had a good idea and we were going to see it through.
What you have to understand is that MTV was just starting around that time. It was a new medium for rock music, and promo videos became a lot more important to the development of a band's success. Now, if you bear in mind that Asia had a big record contract based on their collective pasts, so there was a lot of money there, then they could afford to create, you know, good looking promos that would work well on MTV.
You're leaving now, it's in your eyes, with no disguising it. It really comes as no surprise to find that you planned it all along. I see it now, it comes so clear. Your insincerity, me all starry-eyed. You think that I would have known by now. Now, sure as the sun will cross the sky, this lie is over. Lost, like the tears that used to tide me over.
I'd worked with Roxy Music, which is a very, very fashion-orientated band, and they could get their faces on the cover of any magazine in Europe. But because Europe is not dominated by radio, it's dominated by magazines, the visual image is much more important. But when you come to America, because it's so vast, radio is all important, and the magazines pale into insignificance. Therefore, you have to have a much stronger audio image than you do visual one. I'm quite convinced of that. I mean, it was only, remember at that time that MTV was starting up, it was in its infancy. Yeah. So we fortunately had a very strong audio image, and therefore if I can use Roxy Music as a comparison, however good their music is, it's far outshadowed by the way the band looks. And with us, we felt that the musical image was much more important.
The members were big enough for an impact to have been made. They weren't like a new band starting from scratch. They had a history, people were aware, people were interested, people wanted to hear the record. So MTV alone did not break Asia, but it certainly would have helped their development.
And they had the added advantage they could play, and they knew how to actually work a big audience. So that when they went on tour in America, it didn't matter whether they were doing clubs or doing arenas, they could work them because they had such a background. They were live working musicians with such a history behind them. They could gel together on stage and make things happen.
Actually, we already had the tour booked about 5 or 6 months prior to actually going into America. And, you know, we were very keen to do the whole trip, you know, the live work and the album as well. And we booked into quite small places, about, you know, 2,000 to 3,000 seaters maximum, and the response was staggering because we were valuing the commitments to the smaller places, even though at that stage we could probably have played much bigger. We stuck with the tour that we had already booked in, and of course, you know, the tickets were they were the hottest tickets in town, you know, because of course we were playing. Sometimes we did a gig with 1,500 people there, and the album was in the top 10. But I mean, from our standpoint, it was a great way to break the band in on a live basis, and of course the response we got was staggering.
What they had was that ability to work together in a classic British 70s style, but to understand this was a different era, this is a new environment, and I think they were all excited by it. I think for the first time, he had a bunch of guys who could make music that was appealing to a mass. And they spent so long, especially Steve Howe, Carl Palmer and John Wetton, making music that appealed to a niche. I actually think that they got turned on by the whole idea of doing something a little different, being pop stars, if you want, for a short while.
Now, sure as the sun will cross the sky, this lie is over. Like the tears that used to tide me over. You're on your own, inside your room, claiming victory. You were just using me, and there is no one you can use now.
There's no concept to the Asia album at all, in terms of a storyline or whatever. But I think the combination of those four musicians, Wetton, Downes, Howe and Palmer, plus Mike Stone, the producer, plus John Colodner, the A&R guy, always had a feel for how an album should actually sound, how it should move. They're an album-oriented band with album-oriented people involved. And these people understand that you just don't take 8 or 9 songs and throw them together. You have to understand how things work.
All the songs are very catchy. They all work individually and they all work as a collection, even if there isn't a concurrent theme running through that collection.
The key tracks hit and make massive impact, but the rest of it doesn't make you go, oh God, I think I'll skip that track or I'll skip that track. It's actually an album which works as a record. There's no concept behind it, but it is an album. And it stands as one of the great albums of that era because it's been designed and developed and put together as an album. There's no feeling, as can happen these days, as long as you've got 2 really good tracks on an album, the rest of it doesn't matter, people will buy it. Actually, I think a lot of, shall we say, thought went into the way the album was going to be constructed and presented, which is part of the whole package with Asia. The whole thing was thought through. And strangely enough, because obviously the vinyl years, you had side 1, side 2, so you had to break. When you put it on CD, it actually works going through from what was side 1 into side 2. So interestingly, I don't know whether there was any concept of something was happening revolution-wise on technology, but it does actually work like that.
Asia very much had their own sound, and it's aligned with the big AOR bands from America, but because it's made by a group of Englishmen, it's sufficient with a progressive rock background. It's sufficiently different sounding. I mean, it doesn't sound like Journey or Toto.
Can you compare it to the American AOR legends of the time? Hard, because Journey, REO Speedwagon, Foreigner and so forth had a different style and a different sound and were known for what they did with those things. So I think actually it stands as a very good album. It stands as an extremely strong album, but it almost stands alone.
The closest perhaps you could get to what Asia were doing was the 90125 album by Yes. Maybe UK's more melodic moments, or any of the prog rock bands who went a bit AOR in the 80s.
I still compare it to 10cc. I think there is a comparison in the way that the albums were constructed by phenomenally talented people who maybe should have been doing something slightly different. You can compare it maybe to Queen to some extent. You can compare it to so many different things, but is there one direct comparison that actually makes sense? I'm not sure there is. All you can say is it's a strong rock record for its time, and still today, it still sounds very strong.
It's a classic rock album, and it's a classic rock album. You know, it's a really, really good, strong album. It's, and in context of what it is, it's a classic.
I would personally doubt that any of the four members of Asia would regard that debut album as being their finest moment. They're probably quite proud of what they did, but I doubt very much, certainly Steve Howe, certainly Carl Palmer, and certainly John Wetton would regard it as being the pinnacle of their career.
I would think you'll find that all the individual members of Asia are very, very proud of the Asia album, but I'm sure that Carl Palmer, certainly Carl Palmer and Steve Howe probably have other albums in their canon that they probably regard as better works. John Wetton, I mean, the Starless album and also Red the King Crimson albums that he appeared on are phenomenal records. Jeff Downes, on the other hand, had only been in Buggles, so it was a considerable step up for him.
With hindsight, I don't even know if they'd want to have gone into the project, apart from the commercial aspects and the money they made from it, and that must have been rather good for them, having spent years comparatively struggling, just playing their music to a very, very select audience, but not necessarily small, but certainly selective audience. So Asia itself probably stands as one of those moments that was a glitch in history, because it brought together people who had no right to work together doing this sort of thing, and it proved it could work for a time. So that is a triumph of its own right. But in terms of the individuals involved, I very much doubt that they'd look at this album and say, that's it. If I had to choose one recorded work to represent my life, it will be it. I don't think it would be.
It was the heat of the moment. Heat of the moment. Heat of...
My feeling on the Asia album is it basically has stood the test of time. Certainly the standout tracks, the hit singles, Heat of the Moment, Only Time Will Tell, Soul Survivor, have stood the test of time because they are products of an era, but it actually works in their favour for once, because the production wasn't particularly state of the art. It was more about making sure the songs stood out. So it's not dated so much as albums which are made 3 or 4 years later.
Asia have never topped the first album. They're sufficiently different these days because of, just the personnel and the way everything has moved. And I think if they were ever to get back together, the 4 people that made the first album, I'm not certain I'm sure they would make a very good record, but I'm not certain they would recapture the magic of the moment. I mean, the song says it all, the heat of the moment. Everything was captured in the heat of the moment. And then, like a wrinkly ninja, it was gone.
The heat of the moment.